Rajendran, Vice Chancellor, Registrar, Professor Gurumalesh Prabhu, and other higher officials for giving permission to conduct this international webinar. At the outset, I also thank all my faculty members of ALAGAPPA University College of Education for extending their support for organizing this international. I also extend my gratitude to Organizing Secretary Dr. M. Sukanti for initiating this international webinar. On behalf of ALAGAPPA University College of Education, also extend my welcome to today's chief guest speaker from Mohideen Nizar Anwar, Education Officer, Ministry of Education, Singapore, for this international webinar on differentiated instruction and flexible assessment. At the outset, it is a need of an hour where we are moving towards online teaching in this during COVID pandemic situation. So at the outset, it is a need of an hour to conduct online classes, and differentiated instruction is a must for individuals or the diverse learners and to accommodate all the individuals in a classroom. So at this juncture, it is a need of an hour to think about differentiated instruction and flexible assessment, where we are concentrating on this online teaching and online learning. So in this aspect, I think this international webinar, which we are conducting today, will be an useful one for the participants and for the faculty members who are going through this COVID-19 pandemic situation. So at this juncture, I feel this international webinar will be an eye-opener for all the educationists and the faculty members who are working towards online teaching and online learning, where it will be very useful for everyone to design our instruction in a differentiated manner and to cater to the diverse learners. And also the other part of teaching learning is evaluation part. So this seminar will focus on how we can flexibly adopt our assessment procedures. So in this aspect, this international webinar will be an effective one for the participants to give an insight towards a flexible assessment for the students with diverse needs. So in this aspect, I request the organizing secretary to introduce our international speaker, Dr. Mohideen Nizar Anwar, Education Officer, Ministry of Education, Singapore, and initiate this international webinar. Thank you for giving this opportunity. Once again, on behalf of ALAGAPPA University College of Education, I extend my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to the higher officials of our Vice Chancellor, Registrar, and faculty members for organizing this program. So at the outset, I also thank Organizing Secretary and request her to introduce the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, I'm very happy to introduce resource person of today's webinar, Dr. Mohideen Nizar Anwar, Education Officer, Ministry of Education, Singapore. He has working as Education Officer in Singapore for the last 20 years. He served as the Assistant Registrar of Singapore in the Tamil Teachers Union, Deputy Secretary of Federation of Indian Muslims in Singapore, and also Honorary Secretary of Singapore, Takkalai Muslim Association. He chaired many conferences in Singapore, India, Malaysia, and Turkey, and published 10 books. So far, his credit. It's our honor and so glad to have you all here today. We appreciate your presence at this difficult time. I'm excited to get no more than 800 participants are here in this forum from all over the globe. I welcome you all on behalf of ALAGAPPA University College of Education to this webinar. Your participation is important throughout the session. Right now, I have everyone to mute to avoid background noises that may disturb listening to this webinar. You can enter the questions and comments in this question box, chat box, throughout the presentation. Thank you. Thank you. Now, the resource person, I invite the resource person, Dr. Mohideen Nizar Anwar.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much, madam.
Thank you.
Okay, can you see my screen, the slides?
Oh.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, and Rajendran sir, Dr. J. Sujata Malini madam, Professor H. Guru Mallesh Prabhu sir, Dr. M. Suganti madam, respected academic staff, scholars and students. It is indeed my pleasure to be able to connect and reach out to all of you today. All right, I thank the university for this wonderful opportunity provided to me. Our webinar earlier to classroom teachers. So there is a history, all right, of differentiated instruction. Before that, let me just tell you, classrooms today are very complex. Okay, just as everyone has a unique fingerprint, every student has an individual learning style. We cannot deny the fact that not all our students are going to grasp a subject in the same way or share the same level of ability or competence. In this sense, trying to teach the individual instead of the whole group can be no stress on teachers and may even affect the way they function effectively. So one of the realities of the teaching job is coming to terms with the fact that instruction which is not differentiated will probably not reach the intended target audience. So first, let's explore the term differentiated instruction. So it is widely used term in education today, although it is often looked as something which is time-consuming and difficult to execute. It is a process whereby we strive to meet the diverse needs of our students. Having said this, desirable outcomes and benefits always don't come easy. It's always a struggle. It's a hard fight if we were to achieve all these outcomes. Now, let's come back to the history. There is a little history we ought to know about differentiated instruction. The roots of differentiated instruction goes all the way back to the days of the one-room schoolhouse. I think the current generation will not be very aware of this one-room schoolhouse where one teacher had students of all ages. I think even in India, maybe in the rural areas and villages, they may still be having this system. Okay, from as early as 1800s, okay, a single teacher was required to teach grade 1 through grade 8. Okay, and some more rural areas were just too sparsely populated to support multiple classrooms. So the towns built one room in students' abilities within grade levels. So this is an evolution the education landscape has seen in the area of instruction. So let's go a little deeper into what differentiated instruction is all about. Carol Ann Tomlinson, okay, Dr. Carol Ann, she's a leader in the area of differentiated learning and professor of educational leadership in the University of Virginia. So according to her, differentiated instruction is a teaching philosophy based on the premise that teachers should adapt instruction to student differences. And teaching is not just about marching students through curriculum locksteps. It's not one size fits all. It has to be customized. And according to her, educators have this responsibility to modify instruction to meet students' varying readiness levels, learning preferences and interests. If we think deeper, it's not just about professional responsibility. So beyond that, it is much more about moral responsibility. So it just takes some reflection to realize that. So in a differentiated curriculum, the teacher offers different approaches to what students learn. From the diagram we see, we can see that there are three phases, namely content, process, and product. Now let's look at the content phase. This is the phase formative assessments play an important role in identifying student needs and progress. Students' interests have to be taken into account. This means, I think someone's mic is on, I think. This means teachers have to have references and access to a variety of resources and texts. They continue to build on students' strengths. We teach strategies for areas of deficiency. So we cannot have one strategy for all the students, okay? Depending on the ability of the students and how we differentiate the lessons, we got to have a few strategies so that we can help all the students. So next we come to the process phase. The fundamental question we have here is how students learn. So this is where curriculum compacting happens. So curriculum compacting is an instructional technique that is specifically designed to make appropriate curricular adjustments for students in any curricular area and any grade level. So the key word here is at any grade level. So we cannot dismiss the idea of differentiated instruction even if we are teaching students at secondary or tertiary level. It is still our duty to ensure that instruction is differentiated. And scaffolding happens in this phase. This is where there is gradation of skills proficiency. Teachers will practice flexible grouping and pacing. Students will be offered multiple learning tools. There will be a variety of instructional strategies. Effective questioning is an integral part of not only the process phase, but also differentiated instruction as a whole. Now, finally, we move on to the product phase. Okay, one disclaimer I have to make. Although there is a product stated in this diagram, our focus is more on the process. Okay, the aim of DI or differentiated instruction is not so much on the results. Okay, it's much more on the process. Okay, so now in the product phase, one question here will arise: how students will demonstrate what they have learned. So academic and affective needs will be addressed. There will be authentic tasks and assessments. There will be various opportunities and choices as to how students demonstrate their learning. They can write, speak, conduct, create, research, record, or share. So what we eventually aim to achieve is the expansion of the walls of classrooms, student interaction, and student ownership. So how do we actually differentiate instruction in the classroom? There are many ways and paths to differentiating instruction in the classroom. DI, okay, I will just mention it as DI or differentiated instruction. It begins with a selection of standards based on content, all right? We have to determine the readiness and student interest through diagnostic testing or learning inventories. This takes place at the very early phase, probably at the design stage, all right? So that is when we would have decided what we are going to do. And content delivery is varied through student interest, learning styles, and readiness. So students work on varied activities. So within a class, there is no single type of activity happening, all right? Depending on the ability of the students, tasks will be differentiated, okay? In a class of maybe 20 or 30 students, there may be 3 or 4 different kind of tasks happening at one point of time. So we take questions and review the lesson with the entire class. At the end of the day, what the whole class is going to be covering will be more or less the same. It's just that the strategy, the pedagogy was different for each group. And there will be variation of assessments and projects. And there's a whole class review of standards. Okay, one thing to take note here is these are not rules, all right? They are ideas. Okay, so what does a differentiated classroom look like? There will be choice of student assignments, and it should be included in the lesson plans, all right? When we plan the lesson plan and how we differentiate the lessons, it'll be in detail in our lesson plan. And there'll be multiple reading texts for students because not every student can read the same text and not every student will read the same way. So there has to be variation in even the text given to the children. And so there will be personalized learning, and students will be tested in multiple ways. And teaching to multiple forms of intelligence, it will be good if you can read up on Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. Okay, I will not go through too much in detail because I think we would need another presentation if I were to go through Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. All right, it will give you a good insight into how learners vary in terms of learning styles, and you will get a clearer picture as to how they can be helped and how we can help them succeed in school. So any academic pedagogy or instruction has its ups and downs. All right, let us see what are some of the advantages and benefits of differentiated instruction. So research shows that differentiated instruction is effective for high ability students as well as students with mild to severe disabilities. So when students are given more option on how they can learn material, they take on more responsibility for their own learning. Okay, students appear to be more engaged in learning, and there are reportedly fewer discipline problems in the classrooms. Why fewer discipline problems? Because every student is engaged. There is no situation where some student is left out of the activity and he or she has nothing to be done. Because of differentiated, every student has something to do. All right. And Mike, please.
I request, pardon, sir. I request Ajit Kumar to mute. Ravi, please remove him.
जो देखे हुंडई शोरूम है यहाँ
Ravi,
वही गलिया में एगो पीसीसी है ना?
Yeah, I mute you, ma'am.
है ना? वो पीसीसी हमने 6 माइल ना मेरा कॉन्वे पे घरवा है.
yes, sir, you can continue, sir.
Okay, all right. So the benefits of differentiation in the classroom are often accompanied, all right, by the drawback of an ever-increasing workload. Some of the things to bear in mind, all right. Of course, it's time-consuming, all right. The DI requires more work during lesson planning, all right. Even to prepare a lesson plan for a normal class, we spend so much of time. If we were to infuse differentiated instruction into our lesson plan, rest assured, it is going to be time consuming, but it's going to be very rewarding for us, all right? And many teachers actually struggle to find the extra time in their schedule. We can't blame them, okay? As teachers, we know how it is, all right? It is a challenge, all right? Then the learning curve can be steep. I would like to explain this learning curve a little more. Okay, the learning curve theory proposes that a learner's efficiency in a task improves over time the more the learner performs the task. So initially, DI happens. There's a lot of work for the learner as well as for the teacher. But as they do it consistently over time, both of them, okay, become better. So in informal usage, deep learning curve means something that is difficult, okay, and it takes much effort to learn. The basic theory behind the concept of a learning curve is that there will be usually an initial period in which the amount invested would be greater than the return. Okay, but after the learning curve has been overcome, the return should be greater than the investment. For example, imagine you've just started a new job. At first, the company will need to spend time training you, and you will need some time to get used to the new tasks you are responsible for. And however, after this initial period of high cost and low output, you will have the experience necessary to perform the same task faster and better. So it takes time, all right? The learning curve is steep, but eventually you will reach where you want to be. So the learning curve is also known by different names, partly due to its wide variety of application. Some people also call it the experience curve. Some call it the cost curve. Some call it the efficiency curves, and some call it the productivity curves. All right. I think in education terms, we call it the learning curve. Okay. So some schools also lack professional development resources. I can tell you, a lot of schools are trying, okay, and have started this DI, differentiated instruction, but there are still many more schools, okay, who need guidance, okay, and help from various organizations or even from their own ministry, okay, to carry out these programs. They need additional support, and some teachers may require more resources than the others, depending on how they plan to implement differentiated instructions. And many schools lack the professional development resources to train their staff or faculty. So these are some of the disadvantages. And also critics, you know, in any form of pedagogy or instruction, there will be critics. So their argument is that there isn't enough research to support the benefits of differentiated instruction, outweighing the added preparation of time. So the time factor here is the main problem, okay? We all agree that DI means more time, it's more work for teachers. I think there is an element of patience which needs to be factored in. You cannot expect results immediately. As long as we do something good for the learner and we know that they are along the way learning well and not being left out, I think it's worth the effort and worth the time. Yeah. So differentiated instruction is about creating multiple paths. So students with different abilities and needs have an equally rich learning experience like their peers who are better off than them in terms of ability. It allows students to take greater responsibility and ownership for their learning. And differentiated instruction provides opportunities for peer teaching and cooperative learning. Students are not left on their own, so the teacher actually prepares groups within class, all right? She may even pair the good ones with the weaker ones. In that sense, peer learning or even group learning takes place effectively. So there are several reasons why differentiated instruction should be used in a classroom setting. So research has shown that individuals are better at learning information through different modalities. Okay, you go back to Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. Not everyone learns something the same way. Some are visual learners. Okay, some are audible learners. And some prefer to move about, run about, some prefer to do research, some prefer to sing. So there are many ways learners actually learn and grasp things. So it allows educators to cater to different learning styles. Educators must differentiate the rigor of the content because students differ on performance and readiness levels. So we have to understand that some students will find certain material engaging and some will not, all right? It's very impractical for a teacher to believe, okay, that his or her lessons or even lesson materials are going to be appealing to all the students. That is never going to happen. Okay, that's one reality we have to come to terms with, right? In a typical classroom, some students will grasp concepts easily, whereas some students will be totally lost, right? So educators need to realize that students learn a particular content not in the same time period, all right? So, and also there may be students with disabilities. Some are slow learners, ADHD. We have many kind of scenarios in the classroom. So differentiation and modification is a need of the moment in most, if not all, the schools or institutions. All right. So in line with the differentiated instruction, we move on to an important and related component of the educational system called flexible assessment. So before that, let's take a look at this illustration. So have a look at it. For a fair selection, everyone has to take the same exam. So the task, please climb the tree. So unfortunately, this is the sad state of assessment in many institutions. So assessment, for its intended purpose, is unfair. All right, it is unfair if students are not provided with equal opportunity to demonstrate what they know. All right. Example, some students were not adequately prepared to perform a type of assessment task, and thus the assessments are biased. So these biased assessments are used to judge students. I'm sure it happens in a lot of institutions even today. So a fair assessment is one which students are given equitable opportunities to demonstrate what they know, according to LAM 1995. And equitable assessments means that students are assessed using methods and procedures most appropriate to them. So I hope we are not guilty of such a thing which we see in the illustration over here. So to combat this situation, we turn to flexible assessment. It purely deals with the student voices in learning. Importance is given to the student rather than the process of assessment. Our goal here is to help the student reach his goal through the means he or she is capable of and comfortable with. So we know teaching is like a game of bowling. We try to roll the ball down to the middle and we hope that it hits most of the students. Yeah, but unfortunately that doesn't happen. Okay, the bowling ball doesn't hit all the students, all right? So we are slowly trying to move away from this situation so that all the students can benefit, all right? So the game of bowling has to change, okay? The game of assessment has to change. So I must stress one point here. This change, okay, in assessment or a move towards a flexible assessment will not happen overnight, all right? Educations and institutions have to continuously strive for this to happen. This may require the change in mindset and moving away from the norms. And then again, I can tell you, this is, or rather, this may take a lot of time, okay? We know many schools have already embarked on it and on the way to making flexible assessment work well for all their students, right? So let's look at this term called plus age. Okay, it's a novel system of combining formative and summative assessment. Okay, for example, a student completes two assessments, one mid-year examination and one end-of-year examination. So both are considered summative assessments, but the student gets to choose whether the first assessment counts in the final grade. Okay, I must tell you, not all schools practice this. Okay, because of some issues in recording the marks and catering to all the students' needs. So, but we have some schools who are actually into this. Okay, even in Singapore, okay, to an extent, we have a certain level of plus age. All right, where we choose students' best grades to be included in their final grades for the year. All right. So in this sense, in some institutions, this flexibility is practiced. Some will discount the first assessment and some will discount the second one. So plus age allows early indication of poor understanding with potentially no final grade consequence. So this eventually prevents high stakes anxiety. All right. Why are we making students stressed? Okay, why are we torturing them? Okay, give them a certain extent of choice. where they can choose how they want to be assessed. So a very important and basic component of flexible assessment would be self-assessment. Okay, the learner is given time and space to absorb, deliberate, and reflect his or her learning. Okay, in the fight, okay, for time, what happens is we fail to give our learners, our students, time for this to happen. Okay, self-assessment happens very rare. Doesn't happen much in the classroom. Okay, maybe the student may be doing this self-assessment at home, but what we are striving for is self-assessment process to be part of the curriculum. Okay, and every student should be given this chance, so they have a chance to actually reflect on action. Okay, this improves learning as well as assessment. All right, so what to assess? In flexible assessment, this is one question educators have to ask. What do we assess so that the learner is not shortchanged? Okay, what is going to constitute the formative and summative assessment? In the event that a portfolio is used, what is going to be comprised of? So we keep on exploring options and widen the spectrum of assessment process. The good thing is this flexibility allows us to say there is no dead end. We just need some creativity and support from the school management as well as the government. Okay, once we have all these factors working well, I think we are on the way to having good flexible assessment. Now, the next important question is how are we going to assess the learners? There are several ways, okay, of assessing the learners. Just look at this screen. I can see at least 45 ways of assessing students, all right? And how many of these are we using currently in our classroom, okay? So I think we educators also need some, okay? It all boils down to how careful, fair, and innovative educators and institutions are going to be. So now let's look at the type of assessment we can explore. The types of assessment I'm going to share, okay, have been in existence, all right? I have not created totally new stuff, okay? Like a magician, no way, okay? They have been there all the while, okay? It's just whether how far we have ventured into some of these. So firstly, we have a formative assessment. They're used mainly during classroom teaching. It serves as a quick check on understanding. All right. Some examples would be thumbs up, thumbs down, and brainstorming. These are quick ways for the teacher to check whether the learners have grasped whatever he or she have taught them. All right. And formative assessment can happen on a daily basis. All right. And the teacher has the liberty to design the kind of formative task, all right? So we come to the summative assessment. Okay, these assessment measure long-term academic goals, all right? And they are used mainly for grading, all right? One good example will be the PARC, which is the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, all right? That is more for the tertiary level. And some examples close to our heart will be the midterm exams, the final exams, the unit tests, and the projects. These are summative assessments because they have an impact on the final grade of the students and how the student is going to be placed in the next course of his educational journey. And diagnostic, okay, they are used to get prior acknowledgement, prior knowledge on students, okay, and to plan for future instructions. So this diagnostic assessment takes place in a very, very informal setting, all right, like a pre-course test, all right. And of course, this pre-course test will not be a graded one. Okay, the main purpose of this pre-course test is for the teacher to better understand the student so as to help the student. Most of this diagnostic assessment happens at preschool, kindergarten, and primary school levels. Yeah. And next, we have a formal assessment, something very close to our heart and something which we all do without fail. This kind of assessment comprises of tests which are strict and specific. Okay, 1 equals to 1. Okay, anything other than 1 is wrong. Okay, we don't give the opportunity to students to come up with alternative answers. All right, there are specific answer keys and marking rubrics for this kind of assessments. All right, one example would be the SAT. Okay, or even the kind of exams we do in our organization or schools. And we have this informal assessment where the teacher, okay, or the educator doesn't work on supporting data. All right, there is no data for the teacher to derive a particular kind of assessment. They use normal classroom testing procedures. Okay, an exit ticket would be one example, and another example would be think, pair, share. So these are actually learning pedagogies happening within the classroom. As the word suggests, informal. The setting is very, very informal. Okay, just like the illustration you see on the screen. All right, there is no element of fear. Okay, the teacher looks very warm and the students look very happy. All right, I think this can also happen in a secondary or tertiary classroom. It all depends on how the teacher wants to approach the students. Right. And a behavioral assessment. Okay, this may sound unusual, but this is common in special education because we know in special education the needs of the children are much more, right, than the normal children. Okay, so one of the best examples of a behavioral assessment would be the functional behavioral assessment. All right, and this kind of skills are often used for professor evaluations. Okay, maybe even in a university or polytechnic. But now over here in Singapore, we use it also for peer assessment. All right. Sometimes when we factor in marks for the students, one portion of the marks, okay, a certain percentage of marks, okay, will be from peer assessment, which is of course moderated by the teacher. The children are given rating scales, okay, to rate their peers' presentations. Emotional assessment, okay, they are used mainly for emotionally disturbed students. They're often written as observations. Examples include a checklist and student questionnaires. All right, we don't have many students in one school having this kind of problem, but it is a need of the moment. Okay, there are many more students who are feeling more depressed and feeling stressed. So I think it's good if educators actually get more training on how to actually conduct emotional assessment of students and then decide on some form of assessment for these students. And next is the screening assessment. It's often used to identify students at risk of failing. Often used in RTI, okay, that is response to intervention. It is becoming more and more popular now because we have many students at risk. We have so many at-risk cases now, okay. So not only at the primary level, even at secondary and tertiary level, screening, the process of screening, okay, is happening to a very large extent here, all right. And next is a very important kind of assessment. I would spend a little more time on this, which is called authentic assessment. All right. They resemble real-world tasks or activities. Okay, they can be structured as written or oral assessments, completed individually, in pairs, or in groups. Okay, and this kind of authentic assessment are often presented as ill-structured problems with no right answers. Okay, so we are not going to tell them, hey, what you told or what you presented is wrong. Okay, they are just presented with a problem and they come with possible solutions. All right. And we ask students to communicate their knowledge orally in writing or in writing to a specific audience for a specific purpose. Okay. One example can be a speech given to a group of audience, all right? It can be to a group of students during recess time in the school, or just a performance, okay, after school to students who are going back home, okay? There will be certain objectives, okay, real life objectives tied to this kind of authentic assessment, all right? And most importantly, these assessments are designed to take place in an authentic setting, all right? So there are a few definitions about the term in literature for authentic assessment. Grant Wiggins, all right, says that a task or assessment is authentic when we directly examine student performance on worthy intellectual task, all right? Next question here arises. So the critics will once again start to ask, so aren't all activities done in school worthy intellectual task? So what makes authentic assessments so worthy as compared to the work we do in school? So now, Wiggins, all right, Grant Wiggins again feels that tasks are only intellectual if they are realistic and practical. They cannot be considered authentic if the student is being assessed in the normal routine way, all right? Normal routine way is the pen and paper examination, all right? Information has to come from a variety of sources. There has to be a mixture of portfolios, work samples, reflections, performance, open-ended questions, hands-on tasks, and teacher observations. See, so many things coming together to form a good authentic assessment component, all right? So once again, a lot of effort is needed on the part of the teacher, all right? So if you notice, the word examination was never mentioned by Wiggins, all right? So the next question pops up. So aren't exams important? So examinations, as we know, they were introduced as a means, they were first introduced, all right, as a means by which educators can quickly give the same questions to students at the same time, all right? The problem with exams, okay, is that they tend to be nothing more than a snapshot of the student's ability. It's a snapshot taken completely out of context, all right? The student is given a defined period of time, usually 2 to 3 hours, to recall and regurgitate information which is also taken out of context, which holds little or no meaning in a student's life, all right? So according to Wiggins, examination doesn't fully define a student, all right? What if I'm sick on the day of exams and I fail the exams? Does that make me a bad student? No. All right. So there must be something more to the examination or the dependence of exams. All right. And next we come to performance-based assessment. So students can create, perform, provide a critical response, all right? Examples can include dance, recital, dramatic enactment, okay? The beauty of it is they're all tied to the objectives of the lessons, okay? The instructional objectives and special objectives of the lesson, okay? So the teacher has this responsibility to marry these two together so that the students, while enjoying the performance and assessment at the same time, also the teacher also achieves the lesson objectives, all right? And there may also be prose or poetry interpretation. So this form of performance assessment can take time, so there must be a clear pacing guide. In many situations, okay, the learner and the teacher can get carried away, all right? Because as we know, performance based, when we talk about performance, it needs some form of rehearsals. So there's a time factor involved here. So I think there must be a clear pacing guide, okay, by both the teacher and the student. If there is, I think this will reap a lot of good benefits. So next we have the criterion reference assessment. So for this test, right, it compares a student's knowledge and skills against a predetermined standard cut score, okay, or other criterion. In this, the criterion referenced assessment, the performance of other students does not affect the student score. Okay, just like, okay, the student sits for an exam, there is an answer key, all right? You mark the student's work based on the answer key. If it's right, it is right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. It doesn't matter how other students perform, all right? This is criterion reference. I'm sure we do that in school as part of the formative assessment. And then comes the norm referenced assessment, okay? Comparison is done, okay, against other students, okay, in the cohort, all right? So this is where moderations happen, okay? On paper, a student may have scored 80%, all right? But upon comparing with the cohort, okay, the final grade of the student may be higher or lower, okay? It all boils down to the bell curve, okay? Unfortunately, many institutions are still dependent on bell curve, so we have to have the top 5 or 10% and the bottom 5 or 10%, all right? Good and bad, I think we are the moral guardians of the curriculum. We should have a say and we should be in a good position to decide whether what we do does good for our learners. All right. So flexible learning, okay, happens when there's flexible assessment, and flexible assessment, okay, will help flexible learning. Okay, and of course, we need to have flexible teachers for all this to happen. They are all interlinked. Okay, we need flexibility in all aspects so that at the end of the day, our objective is to produce, okay, superior graduates. All right. A graduate who scores very high in tests doesn't mean they're superior. Okay, at the end of the day, they should have learned something. All right, learn something to benefit society. All right. In turn, they should give back to the society by being useful and of course sharing all the good knowledge gained along the way. Okay, through this flexible learning, flexible assessment, and of course through the good work by the flexible teachers. So, the industrial age model of education was designed with the one-size-fits-all approach. The system, I think even today, to an extent, the system exists. The system didn't take into account that children are individuals and learn in different ways. So in this system, all right, some children will achieve success. Some will try to desperately keep up with the system, and some will be left behind and eventually fail. All right. So this is the gap we eventually want to address and fill up in time to come. So this is where differentiated instruction and flexible assessment comes into play. Once again, I must stress to you, it will not happen immediately. All right. It's a long process. With some patience and determination, I think we can move towards that direction. So as educators, we all have to be advocates of inclusion, all right? Like what you see in this illustration, the kids are of different height, but they are all within the reach of the pencil, okay? Advocates of inclusion, no exclusion. We do not want to use assessment tools with obvious stereotyping, okay? We have to strive for quality in assessment. There are some things we need to note in order to avoid inequalities in assessment. We cannot rush. Okay, I know, of course, time is precious. We cannot rush. There will be stain, okay, in any assessment type with flaws. Okay, if anything is rushed. Okay, and we have to plan our assessment carefully. Assessment should balance questions on basic conceptual understanding with questions assessing evaluation skills. All right, there must be some form of balance there. And we have to guard against unintended bias. We take reference to the picture we saw earlier about the animals who were being told to climb the tree. Okay, that's a total bias, right? We cannot expect everyone to do the same kind of task. So we have to be careful and ensure that the assessment is a very fair one. At the end of the day, we want all students to learn the contents of their syllabus in their own style and pace without being shortchanged. Rest assured, it won't be an easy task catering to the needs of all the learners in our class and our institutions. But I strongly believe there has to be a starting point, all right? We need a gradual change in the mindset from the teacher, from the institutions, from the administration, and from the government, all right? Everybody has a part to play in this wonderful and noble process. So we should believe in ourselves if we really want to make a difference in the lives of our students. So on this note, I think I will bring my presentation to a close. All right. Thank you all for your patience. You all have been a wonderful audience, wonderful class. Right. Once again, I would like to thank Dr. Sujata Manli Madam and Dr. Suganti Madam for the opportunity and this support. It's a wonderful experience having the chance to speak to so many people here. And I would like to thank all of you present here. I wish you the best of luck in your journey in differentiated instruction and flexible assessment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, madam.
It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now the session is open.
Participants can
Interact with the speaker. Something like you can ask questions if it is in the tablet.
I'm not clear, madam. It's not clear. Can't hear properly.
Excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Only one question in chat box.
Okay, all right.
I read this question.
Okay, madam. Okay.
In such pandemic situation, what would be the assessment process most appropriate?
Okay, I think evidently, as we have seen, even from an Indian perspective, I think even the final summative exams have been called off, right? I think everyone was given a pass mark, but I think in Singapore, what we do is we made some adjustments to the assessment criteria, right? From the period of March to June, students were supposed to actually sit for the midterm examination, all right? We actually cancelled that, made all classes online, and then some of the components for the final grades were actually taken from online assessments, all right? So that's what we did here in Singapore.
என்னோட மெயில்ல இருக்கு sujata.malniya sm
Hello.
Okay, there is a question. What is the difference between formative and summative assessment? Okay, I'll just answer that, all right? Formative assessment is something which happens even on a daily basis, all right? There's one more question. How can we ensure student attention, all right? I think first, like what I mentioned, we have to have a diagnostic assessment and behavioral assessment, all right? Let's say in the beginning of a school term, I think we may need about 2 to 3 weeks, all right, to do this kind of assessment. I think it's fine. This 2 to 3 weeks is not time wasted. It's actually well invested time. It's good to thoroughly know our students very well, and then later on plan activities which will actually keep that student engaged in the work, all right? For a student who is very restless in class, okay, I think they need a lot of hands-on activities. So I think we have to prepare various kind of activities for these children depending on what they're comfortable with and what will keep them engaged, right?
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. I have a question.
Okay, sure. Please ask, sir.
Sir, myself Shantanu Das. I am a student of B.Ed actually. Sir, I have a question that how can we assess two type of students in a school as a school teacher? First one is the type 1. The student is good in education but not really socialized. And the second type is a student is very good socialized but not in very good in education.
Okay, this is a good question. We have a mix of students here in our class, all right?
Yes, sir.
What we want to do is, we have groupings in class for this, okay? One of the groupings we can do is based on their social skills, all right? If you have one student who has very poor social skills, pair him with someone who has good social skills, okay? Likewise,
Yes, sir.
if one of the students is very good academically, pair him with someone who is weak academically, so that they can help one another. So we can actually change the arrangement and move around. We did not stick to one kind of arrangement in the classroom. Okay, this is where the peers help will actually come in handy for all these children who are short of something as compared to their friends.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, welcome.
Sir, good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Sir, very nice presentation, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks to the organizing secretary. I am Ramesh from ALAGAPPA University, sir of Sanmuga Revadi. I have two queries, sir.
Okay, sir. Ask me, sir.
First one is, this differentiated instruction, how differ from programmed instruction? This is my first query, sir.
Okay.
Number two is, if you are providing flexible in assessment, what about gifted learners? Gifted learners may suffer from this kind of flexible.
Okay. Yeah, you mean gifted learners, is it?
It will help for, if you are providing flexible in assessment, it will helpful for the below learners, average learners. What about gifted learners?
Okay.
This is my question, sir.
Okay, I think let me just tell you from Singapore context. Okay, when the children are in grade 3, what happens is there is an assessment. Okay, happening to pick out children who are extremely gifted. Okay, so once the ministry identifies these gifted pupils, they are taken out of the mainstream schools. Okay, and for them it's totally a different kind of curriculum, different kind of assessment altogether for them. All right. This flexible assessment and differentiated instruction, okay, works well in a class where there is not much variations. There are variations, but not extreme variations, okay, in terms of a student's ability in the classroom. Yeah. So as from Singapore point of view, the extremely gifted students are actually having a separate curriculum all together for them. Right. Oh, madam, is there any more questions?
Any questions from the participants? So from YouTube,
Is it practically possible, sir?
Okay, that's why I made a disclaimer. Okay, I told you it's going to take time. All right, this will not happen overnight. Okay, this needs effort on the part of the teachers, the institution, the administration, and the government. All right, so for all you know, it may even take a few years down the road for us to actually achieve DI. So even in Singapore, I can tell you, we don't have 100% okay flexible assessment. We do have year-end examinations, all right, but changes are happening slowly, all right. Hopefully, in a few years, you will reach a point in time where all learners, okay, benefit out of this DI and flexible assessment, okay. Like what you said, it's not practical, yes, but it should happen. There should be a starting point, and we work towards that gradually. It won't happen immediately. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm Divya.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
is there any other question from the participants? From the participants? So we have 4 questions from the YouTube.
Okay. All right.
Shall I ask, sir?
Yeah, sure. What is the question, by the way?
What is the best tool for online assessment?
Best tool for online assessment. Okay, there are many tools available. All right. Over here, we use the student learning management system. All right. It depends, okay. Maybe each country, okay, may have different tools provided by the various vendors and the government, okay. If you ask me, Google Classroom is one of the very good online platform, all right, because you are able to share resources with the students. Students are able to submit their assignments in the platform. I think that's one area we all can explore, okay. Google Classroom, all right, because even in Google Classroom, students can submit their work and teachers can mark their assignment online, all right. So I think that's a very good platform, I guess. Right.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I think Purushottam Reddy has got the answer for this question. And
Okay.
now Sanjit Lima is asking what is the difference between flexible assessment and instructive assessment?
Okay, instructive assessment and flexible assessment. Okay, the term itself explains flexible. Flexible meaning flexibility. All right. We try to move away from the norm. All right. Most schools, okay, are indulging in instructive assessment. All right, where the students are told what to do in a given period of time with certain requirements. All right. Whereas when we talk about flexibility, I use the term plus age. Students even have the liberty to choose which formative assessments to be counted and which not to be counted. So, like I told you, this is not practical in all the schools, all right, especially plus age, all right. You must have strong support from the school administration for this to happen. Okay, so basically, flexibility in assessment is how much we want to move away from the norms. Yep. Hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Next question is from the same person. She is asking there are number of assessment systems. Which one is good one?
Number of assessments.
And the best form of flexible assessment.
Okay, actually, there is no answer to this. All right, there is no best assessment. Actually, we can only decide on that after doing the various kind of diagnostics and studying our students well. Because one assessment doesn't fit for all. All right, so even within that classroom, you may have to have a variety of assessment. So there's no such thing as the best assessment, okay? It all depends on our learners' profiles and how we actually want to modify and differentiate even the assessment. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other question you can ask?
I can't hear properly.
So there is one question from chat box.
Yeah, okay, chat box.
How do you approach discipline and what role does it play in learning?
How do we approach discipline? I think basically it's the same thing, all right? Earlier on, okay, I told you one of the advantages of DI is fewer discipline in class, okay, engaged in the lesson, all right. When the student is not engaged in the lesson, he or she has a lot of time to disrupt the class and do something to disrupt the flow of the lesson. So when the teacher can actually engage the student in some activity, all right, I think that's the best way to address discipline problems, all right. I think this requires some kind of behavior and character study of the student, all right. Yeah.
Now I request, I think Nitish was asking
Okay.
question. I request Nitish to unmute and ask. Nitish? I think he's not available. One more question from the chat box is available.
Yeah, I see one question. What kind of qualities students look in the teacher, right? Yeah. I think that's a very, very open-ended question, all right? Basically, I think they just want an understanding teacher, all right? It's a very open-ended question. There is no one answer to that, okay? Yeah.
Research Nitish, if you are available, you can ask your question. You can interact with the resource person today.
Sir,
Sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, please tell me.
sir, myself is Karthikeyan, sir.
Hi, sir. Hi.
Sir, I have one doubt.
Sure. Please ask me.
Sir, because nowadays students are having different mental capacity, then how to identify the students in the common manner? Because each and every person is having different mind capacity and different thinking. So
Okay.
in class, how to we analyze? Any technique or any idea, sir?
I think if I were you, all right, I will do this in a very, very informal setting, all right. Sometimes you can give them screening tests, questionnaires, okay. It may not, you may not even know the full picture. I think the best way is to just sit down and have a talk with them, all right. I think that is the best way you can really find out what they are and what they are really missing or they really want, all right. So I think beyond this paper and pen assessment, I think it's good to actually sit down with them and talk to them. That's the best way, one of the best way to find out more about them.
Sir, but students are having, if I am saying some points now, the points go in proper manner. If 10 students available now, 5 students is okay. So 3 students, okay. 2 students is not. Then how will you satisfy 10 students, sir? That's why I am asking, sir.
That is where differentiated instruction will come in. All right. Previously I told you, even the reading text must vary. Okay. If you're showing PowerPoint to this group of class, maybe not everybody prefers to watch. Not everybody is a visual learner. Okay. So maybe for those who are not visual learners, you have to give them alternative forms of learning. Okay. Some maybe may prefer to fix jigsaw puzzles. Some may prefer to draw. Okay, so it depends. You have to actually design your lessons in such a way that it is very appealing to the students, because one size doesn't fit all. Right.
Thank you, sir. And some more questions to the chat box.
Hello, Professor Anwar. Hello. Hello, Dr. Anwar.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Dr. Gopalsamy, very good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Nice to learn learned professor like you.
Thank you, sir.
No, my question is, can this Google Meet replace the face-to-face teaching? Can you tell me about that?
Okay. I think over the past 2 months or 3 months, we have had lots of Google Meet sessions with our class. And definitely it will not replace. Okay, we were all actually waiting to go back to class. Okay, to see our students face to face. So definitely, technology will not replace the teacher factor. Okay, the students need us, and we need the students. All right, we are so used to that kind of setting. All right, technology only helps us in these times of pandemic. Okay, they can complement learning in our classroom sessions, but they will not replace the classroom or the teachers. Yeah, that's my take.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Okay, welcome.
Hello.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello, yes, ma'am.
Hello. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon to you.
I must say that this webinar is very informative.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Actually, I had a question. What qualities do teachers need to be successful?
If with reference to, is it the DI or generally?
Generally.
So generally, I think we have to move on, okay, with technology, okay, and innovative, creative, okay. How we taught 10 years ago, we can't be doing now, right? So I think we have to keep abreast of developments in the educational field and also information technology, and also at the same time giving importance to the human factor, okay. And I think that's the best way for us to be successful, right?
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Okay, welcome.
Any other questions from the participants? In the chat box, there is some questions.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat box also.
Hello.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, good afternoon to you.
I'm really honored and thankful to ALAGAPPA University Administration for organizing such an informative webinar. My special thanks is to Dr. M. Sudanti and Dr. J. Malini for their active role and effort for making their event successful. I hope the university will in future organize such events as well. I personally request the administration of the university and the organizing committee as well have an such like webinar in future on research methodology or recent trends in research in social sciences and in education as well. And I finally thank to Dr. Anwar for their energetic presentation and informative presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sir, I think all from this I've asked you, how would you rate the learning and assessment process that we have all gone through during our education?
How do we make the... Come again, can you repeat the question, madam?
How would you rate the learning and assessment process that we have all gone through during our education?
Okay, I think during our phase, our educational phase, we mostly went through the routine assessment procedures. All right. The concept of authentic assessment only came about in the recent past. Okay. So I think in that sense, I should say that we did not go through much of a flexible assessment.
Hello.
Yes,
sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir, may I share your vision, sir?
Yeah, your question.
Hello. My hello.
Yes, sir. Ask me, sir.
My question is how the help to the learner by the CC content for evaluation.
CC as in what's the full form?
CCE.
Continuous
evaluation.
I think you can actually you can factor it with your formative or summative. Okay, actually it depends up to your creativity. All right, I have actually shared with you a few kinds of assessment. All right, what you can do is you can see to which kind of assessment which actually blends well. All right, but then again it depends on the needs of your learner. All right, you actually blend it and marry it with the kind of assessment which will yield the highest benefit to your student.
The criteria of the knowledge for sympathy or empathy, how to measure by the CCE.
Sympathy, okay. I think
sympathy and empathy, how to measure by the evaluation tools by CCE.
I think, to be frank, I must tell you, you cannot fully measure sympathy and empathy through any tools. Okay, I think you need a dialogue. Right? You need a dialogue to actually better understand the learner. All right, because what the learner actually puts on paper may not be a good indication. Because you wouldn't know the state of mind that the learner was in. So I think the best way is a dialogue session with the student. That's the best way to understand the sympathy and empathy.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Hello, yeah.
What happened? No, right?
I hope you.
Question program 2009.
So many people are talking.
Hello.
Hello, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Tell me.
Teachers education program or teacher education policy 2000 now. How do affect on teachers?
I don't get the question, sir. Can you repeat the question?
Teachers Education Policy 2009, previous to 2005 NCF, but difference between them.
Okay, actually, if you're asking me about educational policy in India, I will not be able to answer you, okay? Because I'm based in Singapore, all right? Our policies are totally different. So I think I'm not in a good position to answer that question because it's policy related. Yeah, I wouldn't be very sure about that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. And is there any other participants who are willing to interact with the resource person? Thank you, sir.
Okay, welcome, madam. Okay.
So I think a lot of questions and the discussion was very nice.
Yeah, very enriching. It was nice. Yes.
Yeah. I'm so happy that today's session was very informative, in-depth, and all the participants, they have interacted in an effective manner. They have also asked questions in the chat box and YouTube link also.
Yes.
And
Right.
the participants, they have asked the questions and they have shared their knowledge. And I think at the outset, the topic was very informative one and a very need of this pandemic situation, because we are all moving towards from traditional method to online teaching and online learning. So in this way, we should design our instruction in a differentiated manner. So I hope that this differentiated instruction and flexible assessment international webinar have given a lot of in-depth knowledge and a good effort initiative for our faculties to design their curriculum in a differentiated manner and to meet the needs of diverse learners in their classroom through online. So in this manner, I think this webinar, international webinar by Dr. Moide, was very informative and effective one. And it is evidenced in the form of discussions and interactions that was made by the participants. And they are so curious to, employ a flexible assessment. So they want to know about more on online assessment and instructive assessment and differentiated instructions which will be readable in their assessment procedure. So in this aspect, I think this webinar was a grand success. And I am so happy that our ALAGAPPA University College of Education faculty members and the organizing secretary, they have done a wonderful job and they have conducted this international webinar in a successful manner. So at the outset, I thank today's speaker, Dr. Moide, for being with us for the past 6 hours and extending his knowledge for our faculty and the participants. And at the outset, I also thank all my faculty members, colleagues, and other faculty department faculty members for joining with us and making this program a grand success. I also extend my thanks for the participants who are joining with us and for the formal letter to the organizing secretary, to propose the program. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the wonderful opportunity, madam, and also to madam Dr. Suganti for inviting me to do this presentation. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Right.
Thank you. I, on behalf of ALAGAPPA University College of Education, the entire organizing team, extend a very hearty thanks to this speaker for gracing your important presence and sharing this opinions today. Further, we are grateful to the Vice Chancellor of ALAGAPPA University, Professor N. Rajendran, Registrar of ALAGAPPA University, Dr. Shurmalesh Prabhu, and Dr. Sujata Mali, the convener and principal in charge of ALAGAPPA University College of Education, for their constant help in organizing such a series of webinars. I may like to express our sincere thanks to all the participants for your active participation throughout the session. Well, happens overnight. The wheels start rolling week ago. I request planning and a brief bird's eye for details. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated faculties and the technical chief. And sincerely extend my hearty thanks to all those who rendered their effort in this webinar. Thank you. Thank you, Anandal here. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Your presentation is very nice, Mohideen.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
Chat box all are very appreciation to you.
நல்லா இருக்கு. ரொம்ப நன்றி. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, madam. Thank you so much. I will call you, madam. Okay, thank you.
The participants to fill the feedback box and you can leave the show. You can join us in the next webinar or national webinar which will be on this.